Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look at adding images to tree views in your dialogues. This is where we left our application at the end of the last video. We have a tree control which has a number of entries in it, and we can select each entry and the text of the selection appears in our text window. What we're going to do today is we're going to add icons to each of the entries in the tree control. So let's have a look at the code. Since we'll be adding icons, we need to add each of these icons in a resource file. So here are the commands to add our icons, using the resource icon command. When you're adding a resource, you can either specify it by number or by name. Here we're using the by name method to specify each icon with a name that reflects what it actually is. So having added each of these resources to our application, we now want to find a way to attach them to the individual nodes of our tree control. To do that, we need to create an image list. So let's create a function to pick up our icons and put them into an image list. We'll want our image list to be actually accessible from the rest of the application, so we're going to create some constants and we're going to create a global. The global handle for our image list, and we're going to be adding 4 icons initially, one for the books, one for a folder, one for fiction and one for non-fiction. I'm putting these in with numbers, as in we're going to add the first icon for books, the second one for folder, and so on. So if we go to the end of our code, we can now create a function which is going to populate our image list. When populating an image list, there are 4 pieces of information you need to pass. You need to tell it the depth of colour, for example we're going to be using 32-bit colour today, the width of the icon in pixels, the height of the icon in pixels, and the amount of space you wish to allocate. In other words, how many icons are we going to be putting into our image list. It's always best to over-specify this, so you can always add icons later. So we will set up some local variables to allow us to do this. So there we have 4 variables, one for depth, one for width, one for height, and one for the initial number of icons in our image list. Now that that's been specified, we can now go ahead and create our image list using the image list new icon function. So using the image list new icon command with the 4 parameters, we can create a new image list, and the handle of that image list is passed into the variable we specify, in which case this is our global handle for the image list. If the image list returns 0, it has failed to create the image list. So a simple test on that would allow us to go in and start to add icons to the image list. So we can use the image list add icon button to add individual icons to our image list. So to save a wee bit of typing, I'm going to use the prefix command, which will take what we've got in the quotes here and it will prepend it to the beginning of each line, saving us a bit of typing. So all we have to do here to add the icon to the image list is to give it the name of the icon we specified in the resource command or the number. And since we use names, it's quite easy to add the 4 names to this list: iBooks, iFolder, iFiction and iNonfiction. So our image list is now populated. Having created the image list, we now have to associate it with our tree view. So in the populate tree view function, the first thing we did was to reset the tree view. And having reset the tree view, everything would be cleared out, and we can then set the image list to associate it with our tree view, passing it the obvious parameters of the dialog handle, the handle to the tree view, and the handle to the image list. Now that we've associated the image list to the tree view, we can actually go ahead and specify which image to use. The first thing we did with our tree view is we created a node called books. Now at the moment we put in the image list and the select image list variables as 0. So all we need to do now is to specify the constant for books in our image list. This tells it to use the first icon in our image list. So before we run our code, we have to call the new function we created to populate the image list. So if we go to our PB main, we'll put that right at the beginning so that when we run the code now, we will see that the icon has magically appeared against every single entry, which is fine for books, but we want to have different icons for each of the other nodes. So it shows how easy it is to add an icon to each of the entries. Let's change the code so it specifically does it for the ones we want to populate. Now we put it in for the books and our image list is populated, which is fine. Now we want to take this here, and for fiction we will put it in, but we will change our image to folders. And we'll do the same for the non-fiction. So that should set a folder icon for each of the nodes. And down here at the moment we have an entry for Starship Troopers. We created a generic function to add each entry, so we'll just go in and replace the code we were using for Starship Troopers, and we will put it in using the common function, which means we can quite happily lose this whole section of code completely. Now, since the add node entry is actually generic for each of these, and we pass in whether it's fiction or non-fiction, what we'll want to do in the add node entry is to make it conditional which icon we're going to slot in. So we'll put a select statement in here, and the select statement is testing on the node root, which is either going to be fiction or non-fiction. And we're setting the constant for each of them so that a different icon will be used for each node on that tree. We will see that we have an icon for books and a different icon for the nodes. And underneath each of the nodes, we have a different icon for the different types. So this shows you how easy it is to add icons at each level conditional on the data. Now, there's one more thing you can actually do. At the moment, when you select each of the entries in the node, it appears over here on item selected. Now, the TreeView control will allow you to display a different icon when the node is actually selected. So if we go back to our code, and we will add in an additional icon into our resources. And this will allow us to display a different icon when the node has been selected. And as this is going to be the 5th item on the list, we'll need to go down to where our image list is created, and we will add our new one onto the end. So it will appear in the image list, which is then attached to the tree control. And all we need to do when the tree view is populated, since we're doing this specifically for non-fiction, if we go down here where the non-fiction ones are and replace the selected image with the constant for the other icon we have just added. So when it's not selected, this icon will be displayed, and when it's selected, this icon will be displayed. So if we try running our code now, we will see the nodes are quite happily displayed, but when this particular non-fiction one is clicked upon, you'll see that the icon is actually changing. So this gives you quite a bit of flexibility with very little code. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.